Hey, good morning. Thank you very much for joining this very, very special virtual event with the Honorable Mick Mulvaney, the former acting White House Chief of Staff. We've had a dynamic year, especially with the inauguration of President Joe Biden, after an extended period of uncertainty due to COVID-19. I know that many of us are very curious about what to expect from the new Biden administration and the impact it's going to have on the global business environment. Mr. Mulvaney was one of the longest serving officials of the Trump administration. In addition to acting Chief of Staff, he also served as a director of the Office of Management and Budget, the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the United States Special Envoy for Northern Ireland. He was widely considered one of the most influential and trusted advisors to President Trump. We are so privileged to have this great opportunity to hear from an insider about the transition to the new U.S. administration and the future direction of the U.S.-Korea alliance. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Min-Young Lee from the Korea Times. Min-Young, it's so good to have you join me.
Thank you, James, for inviting me to this very special event with Mr. Mulvaney. As Mr. Mulvaney has been one of former U.S. President Donald Trump's closest aides, it's a great chance for all of us to get an insider's look at what Trump's presidential legacy will be, what Biden's handling of domestic issues and foreign policy would look like, and on the business front, how Joe Biden will reshape the business landscape in the U.S., which could further impact the business community here in Korea.
You know, we have a very impressive turnout today with a diverse group of participants from local and global business communities. And I think we're so excited to hear about our guest insights. I hope that for the audience, you'll be actively engaged. And if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in by using the Q&A function on this call today. So let me just get straight to the Fireside Chat. You know, just a few days ago, we saw the unprecedented second impeachment trial of President Donald Trump, which ended in an acquittal. So Mick, as someone who has such a close relationship with President Trump for so long, what do you think his future role is going to be in the Republican Party? Do you think we're going to see another campaign in 2024?
Yeah. Good morning. And by the way, thank you so much for having me. I so much enjoyed visiting Korea when I was working with the president, and it's great to be here virtually. I wish that we could do this in person, but I appreciate you folks reaching out and doing this over the internet. We don't know. We really, really don't know. And I'm not trying to dodge your question, but the president is going to keep his options open. He is not the type of person to tell you tonight what he's going to do 10 days from now, let alone 4 years from now. My guess is that he is going to stay actively involved in politics. He may get involved in the races in 2022. We have some by-elections, some off-year elections, midterm elections for the House and the Senate in 2022. He may get involved with that. There's some discussion of his children or his in-law children running for office in 2022, although there were some reports today that Ivanka Trump has decided not to run for Senate in the state of Florida. But certainly he is going to remain a central feature of not only Republican politics, but American politics. Now, that being said, it will be curious to see if he's able to maintain his central position for a variety of reasons. Number one, he's going to face tremendous scrutiny, both legally and politically, over his dealings, not only from when he was president, but from before the time he was president. He's under investigation in several states in this nation. There's some word about the Department of Justice looking at some of his doings before he was president. And politically, he should expect to be called into both the House and the Senate for hearings over a variety of things over the next couple of years. And secondly, and I know this sounds sort of trivial, but believe me, it is not. We live in a world of social media. And Donald Trump being kicked off of Twitter is a big deal. It's a huge deal for him. He loses that platform. One of the things that we knew in the White House, for example, we gave a speech, the State of the Union speech in 2019. And for folks who saw that speech in person, we had polling data that said they approved of that speech above 70%. 3 days later, if you did not see the speech, but you saw the speech on the news, your approval rating was in the low 40s. That filter of the media crushed the president's approval ratings. That Twitter was his way to speak directly to people, and losing that platform could really hurt him politically. So I know that's a long answer to your question. I apologize, but it really is a very fluid situation, and no one really knows what the president is going to do, including, I believe, the president himself.
Mick, we have seen a great divide in U.S. politics throughout the last administration, with former President Trump and the media being engaged in an endless war. So some believe much of Trump's achievements during his term have been overshadowed by this troubling relationship. You have a unique behind-the-scenes perspective on the events that most of us know only through the media. So tell us about the most common misperception people have about the last administration and the achievements that we know less about.
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. Common misperception. There's hundreds of them. I got asked one time, tell me something, the press asked me, tell us something about the president that no one knows. And I just was trying to struggle for the right answer. I'm like, he really likes his family. He does. I know that's seems like a silly answer, but when you learn about the president through the media, you think that his wife hates him, he doesn't like his kids, and the answer is not true. He actually likes the family. I remember the first time I was in the helicopter with him as I was chief of staff, I bet he called Barron, who at the time was 10 or 12 years old, 4 or 5 times during the trip, including from the helicopter, saying, "Daddy's going to land in the backyard. I know Mom doesn't like it when I tell you to get out of bed, but come out of the bed and watch the helicopter land." It's that human part of it. By the way, we got a little glimpse of that in the last 24 hours when he went on TV unexpectedly here in the United States to talk about the death of Rush Limbaugh, a very influential conservative talk show host in this country. And the human side of Donald Trump, I think, is the folks, what people miss the most. I don't think that we're going to have much luck in telling the story of a legacy. And that doesn't have as much to do with the bias of the media as it does to do with the riots of January 6th, which I know we'll talk about a little bit more. But for the riots, I think we would have the ability to argue that we had tremendous successes in the first 4 years. We had the lowest rate of unemployment in this country in a long time, lowest rate of minority unemployment ever, no inflation, great experience with judges getting nominated and confirmed to our judicial system, and no new overseas wars for the first time in a president's term in my lifetime. Tremendous successes. And as much as the press would love to have beaten that down before January 6th, I don't think they would have been able to do it. January 6th changed that. The riots in the Capitol changed that. And I think it really makes it hard, really hard for folks to focus on anything about the Trump presidency other than that. As I tell people, you don't get to offset tax policy, great tax policy, against riots and armed insurrection. It's just, you don't, and it's fair. You shouldn't. Armed insurrection trumps everything. And I know that's an inconvenient word, but it's true. So it's unfortunate. It's really disappointing and saddening to those of us who worked so hard in the administration for 4 years to get those achievements, to know that the first line of the history books about Donald Trump will be something about the January 6th riots. And that's unfortunate for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that it clouds what we were able to accomplish.
So this would lead to a direct question about Donald Trump. How would you rate the previous administration's performance?
Up until January 6th, it was pretty good. Listen, again, you go back those list of things that we had accomplished. And I know we had challenges, especially in foreign policy. I was at the meeting with President Moon and President Trump. I was on several phone calls. I know there was tension between us and some of our traditional allies. That was okay. That's healthy. That's not the type of thing that is existential. That's not the type of thing that changes the world for the worst. We had really good successes domestically. We had some great successes overseas. I think if anything, we were able to sort of lift the veil on how challenging it is to deal with China in the 21st century. I think going out of the Obama administration, everybody was assuming that China was going to be an equal partner, a fair dealer on the world stage. And I think we were able to say, no, maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's still a communist nation. Maybe it's still driven by different things than, say, the Republic of Korea and the United States and Australia and Japan are. We had successes with that. So again, I think we had some good things to talk about, but history will not look fondly upon the administration because of the riots.
You know, Mick, I was with you at the Grand Hyatt when President Trump, visited South Korea. I know that we had 50 or so business leaders here, both U.S. and Korean, business owners. At the end of the day, how do you view the bilateral relationship between U.S. and South Korea from your experiences?
I'll give you Trump's experience, and then I'll give you what I think is prevailing today. And it's not that different. The general consensus is the relationship is obviously very, very strong. In fact, the president loved his visit. He did. He struggled with his relationship with President Moon. But by the way, that's not unusual. The president's a very personality-driven guy. He liked personal relationships. He was a deal maker. He did not blend with President Moon the same way that he didn't blend with President Macron or with Prime Minister Theresa May in the UK. But he did with Boris Johnson. He did with other leaders around the world. So it wasn't a policy thing as much as it was a personal thing. And he was concerned about the amount of money that we spend in the bilateral defense agreements. That is not to say that he questioned the underlying alliance and friendship. Okay. In fact, he loved the trip. I remember he talked about the trip all of the time. He loved visiting. He loved the event that we did at the Grand Hyatt. It was a personality thing. By the way, not surprising. Donald Trump, a fairly right-wing president. President Moon, not a right-wing president. So that's probably not surprising. So I don't think the relationship is going to change fundamentally, because I don't think it was at risk fundamentally to begin with. Will the temperature change? Will the language change? Will Joe Biden be a nicer person to work with? Probably. That's just his personality. Donald Trump is a very combative individual. Believe me, no one knows that more than I do. But I don't think the relationship was ever at risk. And I think it's probably going to continue to be strong, despite what the media may have spun out of the difficulties between Donald Trump and President Moon.
I remember it was such a positive, energetic, get together. I'm sure you can agree that day, right? It was fantastic.
Well, it was business leaders, and that's who he loves dealing with. He likes dealing with men and women who get things done. That's what he wanted that's who he wanted to meet with when he was there.
So more on U.S. foreign policy towards Asia. A tougher approach towards China was the centerpiece of President Trump's foreign policy. So should we expect to see a substantial easing in U.S.-China tensions under President Biden?
No. Let me put it this way. And again, I think I've hit on this a little bit. The language will change. The rhetoric will change. The temperature of the discussions will change. I was not obviously able to listen into the conversation that President Biden had this week with President Xi, but my guess is it was a much more cordial conversation than Donald Trump has had with President Xi when I was there. That shouldn't be misinterpreted as a fundamental change in policy. Now, I can tell you that there's very few things right now in this country that are bipartisan, and concern for, antipathy for, wariness of China is a bipartisan thing right now. It's not fair to say that there's a silver lining to the global pandemic over COVID. So I don't know the words to use to describe it, but when the history books are written, I think one of the things that people will realize, or that would realize in hindsight, is that because of the way China handled the crisis at its outset, that it sort of lifted the veil as to what China really was. China is not a leading nation. China is not to be treated the same as the Republic of Korea, or again, Japan, Australia, Germany, the UK, Brazil. It's different. If a pandemic broke out tomorrow in Seoul, you would allow the World Health Organization in, you would allow all the nations in, you would appeal to the World Health, you would be transparent in what was happening. None of those things apply to China. And if China wants to be treated like a first world country, like a leading country, first world is not the best term, but a leading nation of the world, it has to act like a leading nation of the world. It has to act like the Republic of Korea would do under the same circumstances. That didn't happen. And I think Republicans and Democrats alike in the United States get that. And that sort of the veneer of maybe they're just a bunch of Western capitalists who happen to live in China is gone now. And it is a communist nation run differently than our nations are, and that pervades both parties. So I don't think you're going to see a fundamental policy change. You may see things that are a little bit easier to digest, a little media coverage that's a little bit more friendly on both sides. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just a question of style. But the substance, I don't think is going to be that different.
Mick, I'll be very interested to hear your opinion on the different personnel that President Biden, has chosen. Obviously we have, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. We have Kurt Campbell. We have Sung Kim. All the different people that are going to be part of this Asia side of it. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, listen, let's put politics aside for a second. And I often got asked when I was in the administration, if I were in the Senate, would I confirm this or that person? Qualifications count, right? Ability counts, competence counts. And I think each president is entitled to have men and women working for him that he wants. And as long as they are competent and expert in their field and qualified for the position, I think he or she should have that team. And I think President Biden has done a more than half a decent job. He's done a good job of picking people who are competent and qualified. So I may disagree from time to time with Secretary Blinken. My guess is I'll probably agree with him more than I'll probably disagree. My foreign policy probably trends a little bit more democratic in some ways. I'm not a neoconservative warmonger like John Bolton. I'm more of a non-interventionist. So yeah, my guess is that Secretary Blinken and I might see eye to eye more than people realize. But as long as those folks are qualified, I think the president will be well served. Keep in mind, the job of the men and women who serve the president is to give him, in this circumstance, could be him and her in the future, as good an information and an opinion as possible. But Secretary Blinken does not make final decisions. The ambassador will not make final decisions. The president gets paid to make those final decisions. And what you're looking for, and this is me putting my old chief of staff hat on again, is I want the president to be surrounded with smart people, with honest people. They don't bring their own, maybe they bring a little bit of their own agendas to the table, but at least they're transparent about it, so that the president can make the best decision under the circumstances. And I think so far, as much as I might disagree with their politics, the president's done a pretty good job with that.
So as director of the Office of Management and Budget, you played a leading role in directing spending for the entire U.S. government. So what is your view of the economic policy set out by President Biden, of course, including the coronavirus relief package?
I'm really worried about it. I am, and I know I may be in the small minority, including in my own party. My own party wants to spend a bunch more money as well right now. I am really concerned. I wrote 3 budgets for the President of the United States. I've sort of wrote 4, but I really wrote 3. I was chief of staff during the last one. And the budget, the budgeted expenditures, the stuff that we actually can control, you vote yes or no on spending this dollar, was between 1.1 and 1.4 trillion dollars every year when I ran the place. That means that this coronavirus bailout bill, the stimulus bill, is more money in a couple of weeks than we would spend in a year. And that bothers me. It really does. It bothers me not only because of the size of it, because it's cumulative. This is the 3rd or 4th, I've lost track, COVID stimulus bill. By the time this one is passed, we will have spent over $6 trillion dealing with COVID. That's just a bizarre sum of money that combined, if you took the income of everybody in this country, I'm talking about corporations, people, what have you, all of the national income in this country on an annual basis is about $21 trillion. So it's almost a third of what we make in a year as a nation spent just by the government. And I worry about inflation. I do. A lot of folks watching this, including probably you two, don't remember what it's like to live in inflation. I'm older than most people watching this. My family used to sell houses in this country when interest rates were at 16, 17, and 18%. Now I'm in a business now with a guy who's a hedge fund manager. He's business partners with me. He's 45. He's never dealt with inflation. Inflation used to be defined correctly during the Reagan years. Ronald Reagan came on TV when I was a teenager and said, "What is inflation? Inflation is too much money chasing too few goods." And when the government prints $6 trillion, and believe me, that's what it's doing. It's actually running the presses to make $6 trillion without any increase in the number or the amount of the quantity of goods to buy. It sets the stage for inflation. And inflation is a really, really, really bad thing. Again, most people don't remember it, but inflation is one of the harshest, nastiest taxes, directed disproportionately at the middle class, the lower classes, the elderly. Inflation is a terrible, terrible thing. It has brought down governments throughout history, going back to Rome, Germany. Inflation is really dangerous, and I don't think we're paying enough attention. So again, a longer answer than I probably should have given, but I am not really, really pleased with the way that my own party is looking at the stimulus bill. Not pleased with the way the government's looking at it, and I hope that at some point we realize that we can spend too much money, and it could really, really hurt us.
So Mick, you've also mentioned during a recent media interview about the lack of bipartisanship in the Biden administration, especially when the new administration is trying to make bold moves to get the economy back on track. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I don't claim to know Joe Biden really well. I've met him a couple of times, but I know his reputation, and I know a lot of folks who know him. And Joe Biden is a good guy. He is, and I think Joe Biden has a reputation for a deal maker. And I think under ordinary circumstances, Joe Biden would really, really want to be the kind of person to reach across the aisle to sort of create bipartisanship and to unite the country. I don't think he's going to be able to do that for a variety of reasons. Again, not for lack of will. He wants to do it, but there's a couple things that are just different right now that are going to impair that ability, that are going to impede bipartisanship. Number one, Joe Biden does not have a lot of political capital. As nice a man as he is, and as much as everybody wants to like him, and I want to like him, he didn't win this election. The other guy lost the election. That's rare in our system, by the way. In fact, it's the only time I can remember it happening in my lifetime. But most people who voted for Joe Biden weren't voting for Joe Biden. They were voting against Donald Trump. So he doesn't come into office with the same sort of mandate and political capital that say Joe Biden, that say Barack Obama did, or Bill Clinton, or even Jimmy Carter going back to the 1970s. It's sort of this thing that anybody who was on that side of the ballot, aside from Donald Trump, could have won this election. So people were not passionate about Joe Biden, so he doesn't have the ability to sort of push things. By the way, in our system, bipartisanship is often driven by the president. Ronald Reagan, famous for his bipartisanship, was able to drive bipartisanship from the Oval Office because he had power over the Republicans and could get them to do things they did not want to do. Bill Clinton, even though he didn't control a lot of popular vote, was a very popular president and was able to cajole Democrats into working with Republicans, or the opposite of Reagan. Biden doesn't have that, and I think that's going to impair him. Secondly, I think he's dealing with a circumstance that not a lot of people are talking about yet, but I guess it's going to start happening sooner or later. It's already happening sort of in back channels that I participate in, is that it's highly unlikely he's going to run again. I mean, he's already the oldest president. He'd be, I think, 82 or 83 if he runs for re-election or wins re-election. And that's just, there's already discussion about him not running again. So you add those two things to the third thing, which is this, and that is that the Democrat Party doesn't want to compromise right now. By the way, neither does a lot of the Republican Party. So I'm not being partisan here, but the left wing of the Democrat Party wants to beat up on the Republicans, does not want to cooperate with them, and will even sort of punish in Democrat election primaries Democrats who want to work with Republicans. Again, my party probably would do the same thing. So again, I'm trying to be as candid as I can here. But you take those three things together, the lack of political capital because of the nature of the election, the lack of political capital because of the questions about whether or not he's a one-term president, and already sort of lame duck. And number three, the general consensus of the parties right now of not wanting to work together. And I'm just telling you, it's going to be really, really hard to be bipartisan.
Very, very insightful, Mick. I want the audience to know that you were elected to the House of Representatives during the Tea Party wave in 2010, which is 10 years ago. And I think you helped found the Freedom Caucus, right? When at a time when the deficit was a real concern for everybody. So since then, it seems like both parties have embraced a bigger and bigger deficit spending pattern. You just talked about that a little bit. 1.9 billion in in the Corona stimulus package, which is championed by President Biden now. So, what do you think is the reason for this change, and do you expect the deficit to reemerge as a big issue?
Yes, to the reemerging, but why is it happening? One of the things I learned when I wrote the budgets was that it's really a lot more fun to spend money than it is to not. It just is. It's better to be Santa Claus than it is the Grinch who stole Christmas. And it's just easier to say yes to people than it is to say no. And since we've run these deficits for so long, and since people like me have been saying for so long, there's going to be negative consequences of that, and we haven't seen them yet, it's really easy for people to say, oh, you know what? You deficit hawks, you're wrong. Okay. In fact, I remember walking down the tunnel. If you've ever been to the United States Capitol, the office buildings for the House on one side of the road and the Capitol's on the other side, and there's a tunnel underneath the road. And as a young member of Congress, I'm walking across there with an older Republican who'd been there 30 years. And he goes, you deficit hawks, you guys, you come and go. I was here when they came during Reagan and they left. And I was here when they came during Newt Gingrich and they left. And I'm here now during the Tea Party, and y'all are going to leave, and I'm still going to be here, and we're going to spend that money. There's an attitude in Washington that is just inclined towards spending money. It does tend to get people reelected. As I've told folks that, as soon as one person loses their job in Congress for spending too much money, things will change, but voters don't punish elected officials for spending, and they can reward them for spending money. It's just a bizarre circumstance. There's a famous saying, I think it was attributed to Thomas Jefferson, but I'm sure I'm probably going to get this wrong. My American history is not nearly what I want it to be. Of that, as soon as the public realizes it can vote itself gifts out of the public treasury, then that's when the republic will fail. And we're slowly, I think, maybe quickly moving towards that point, that people have lost connection with what things cost, what governments cost. When you can run a machine and print $100 bills, it's really hard to be fiscally conservative.
That's why, many years ago, someone once told me that the job you had, director of OMB, is one of the most important jobs at the White House. So, I know that you know that better than anybody. So thank you for sharing that insight.
Yeah, it's a great job. It's one of those things that nobody understands, which we're okay with because we understand it. So it gives us sort of a leg up. Every single dollar in the federal government runs through the Office of Management and Budget. Most folks know that. What they don't realize is that every single regulation flows through there as well. Most contracting policies flow through there as well. It's the Office of Management and Budget. So most of the management of the government runs through there. I describe it as the the consulting firm to the president. We are the McKinsey or the advisor to the president when it comes to those sorts of things. So it's a wide ranging sort of office, but we don't like to tell people what we do.
So Mick, as acting chief of staff for Donald Trump, you were responsible for ensuring the executive office of the president run smoothly during a chaotic time. So how did you deal with the unique challenges you faced, and how do you think the new White House chief of staff, Ron Klain, will approach the role?
I'll answer both together because I've talked to Ron a couple of times. We have a wonderful tradition in this country of whenever there's a new administration coming in, all of the chiefs of staff from the previous administrations will get together, usually in person. This year's obviously it was on a Zoom call, to sort of welcome the new chief of staff and to give whatever advice that we possibly can. And we did that this year with Ron. He is, I think, very well suited for the job. He knows Joe Biden extraordinarily well. To that extent, that will be an advantage over all of Donald Trump's chiefs of staff. That was Reince Priebus, and then John Kelly, and then me, and then Mark Meadows, a good friend of mine who also formed the House Freedom Caucus with me. But out of the four of those, I knew Donald Trump longer than any of them when I took the job, and I only knew Donald Trump for 2 years. So Ron has known Joe Biden for 20 years or so, so he has an advantage there. I think I think he will do well, but I don't understand the dynamics in the building. No one ever will. Every White House is different. One of the conventional wisdom and the common mistake in our country amongst pundits who watch Washington is that there's this template for a good chief of staff. Not really. Every president is different, and as a result, every chief of staff has been different. Although they do share similarities. I remember talking to Jim Baker, who was held up as sort of the archetype of chiefs of staff under Ronald Reagan, and I think George Bush as well. In fact, he was under George Bush. And as soon as I got the job, I called him because I knew him. His grandson worked for me, and I said, Mr. Secretary, you're the first person I'm calling, but I sort of get the impression you can't help me because I think President Reagan and President Clinton are probably pretty different people. And he laughed and he said, Mick, look, I worked for an extroverted movie star who became president, and you are working for an extroverted television star who became president. So yeah, there are probably some differences, but there's probably a lot of similarities as well. So listen, presidents are different. Obama was an introvert. Clinton was an extrovert. Clinton couldn't keep a schedule. Trump couldn't keep a schedule. Nixon and Obama couldn't live without a schedule. It's just different types of men get elected to that position. And I wish Ron the very best in dealing with his president, because the country is just well served when the Oval Office functions properly.
When you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, Mick, I did not know this, but I guess you were the one who was really in charge of the task force for COVID-19. So knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently? And are you pretty pleased with what you guys have done as related to COVID-19?
Yeah, it's not fair to say, yes, the answer is yes. If we had known now, if we know then what we know now, would we have done something differently? Absolutely, but you can't look at history like that. Why did we do what we did? We did what we did because we had bad information. This goes back to my difficulty with the Chinese and how their lack of transparency crushed the world. Okay, there's no blame for this. I don't believe the rumors about it coming out of be a man-made virus. I believe it to be a naturally occurring virus that was just handled improperly. And here's why I say that. So in the early days of the virus, we knew very little. We knew from the Chinese that it was a coronavirus, and that's about it. Well, okay, so we had that piece of information. What did that tell us? Well, we had experience recently in the last 20 years with two other coronaviruses. We had dealings with SARS and dealings with MERS. What do we know about those two things? They were relatively difficult to transmit, but they were extraordinarily deadly. SARS, I think, was 15 or 16% deadly. If you got the disease, 15 out of 100 people who got the disease died. MERS was almost a third, was 35% deadly. So 35 people out of every 100 who actually got the disease died. We said to ourselves, okay, this is a problem. We need to keep it out of the country. And so that's why we focused so early on things like screening at airports. We didn't learn until much later. In fact, the South Korean outbreak was different because I think it was isolated to a religious center in a secondary city. But it wasn't until Italy when we started to get really good data. And the first thing we knew when I got to Italy was that not only was it really easy to transmit, but it could transmit from people who did not have symptoms, asymptomatic transmission. And that's when everything fell apart, because we were doing screenings at airports. You come into an airport from China, from Asia, and we would take your temperature. We'd put a gun to your forehead and take your temperature, or check you for symptoms. And if you didn't have any symptoms, we'd let you into the country. And we've been doing that for several weeks. And then all of a sudden we find out, oh my goodness, this stuff is really easy to transmit, and you can transmit it without showing any symptoms. Add that to the fact that we still thought it could be between 15 and 35% fatal. And now you're talking about an existential threat to a culture. A disease that passes as easily as the cold, that could kill 25 or 35% of the people who get it. That is worse than the Black Death. And that's why we reacted the way that we did. You started off by asking me if we knew then what we do now, would we do something different? Yeah, we would. The fatality rate in this country is not 35%. It's not 16%. It's under 2%. And did we overact in hindsight? Yeah. But did we do the right thing given the information we had at the time? Probably. And it's just unfortunate that we did not have better information early, because I think this entire experience globally could have been very different. Again, coming back to the Chinese not being good actors.
Then how would you assess former President Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 outbreak? Because he has been taking to Twitter and calling the virus China virus, and there were many controversies around.
Yeah, the style of it. I mean, again, either you like Donald Trump's style or you don't. I'm not going to get into that. I do think we made a mistake, or he made a mistake on the masks. For some reason, we politicized masks. That, if you're a Republican, you didn't wear a mask. If you're a Democrat, you did. I think that's stupid. That it's such a small cost to wear masks. Now, that being said, I will defend the president on this, is that Dr. Fauci, I was in a meeting. I ran the coronavirus task force before Mike Pence took over. And I was at the meeting when Dr. Fauci told us, including me, to go on television and tell people don't wear masks. I did that because that's what Dr. Fauci said to do. So the president was getting that information. So I understand why maybe it happened, but it would have been very easy for everybody to just say, go out and wear a mask. It doesn't cost anything. It's easy to do, and it might have a marginal benefit. So if it costs nothing, but could have a benefit, let's do it. The testing was very poorly handled. I think by now it's been well documented. The Center for Disease Control, the US CDC, mishandled the early testing to the point where it wasn't more readily available and wasn't as reliable as we want it to be. So there were some early hiccups. That being said, I think the Project Warp Speed, the things that we did to encourage the private sector to develop the vaccine in a record time will be one of those shining stars of this. In fact, I even think that many Democrats who are extraordinarily critical of the president will applaud the fact that we were able to come up with a vaccine in less than a year. That's unheard of in this industry. Anybody who knows anything about this, I've learned a little bit about it, will tell you that that's just unheard of. So, again, hindsight is always 20/20. By the way, we're sitting here right now. There's a great piece out today in our domestic press about how Florida handled COVID one way, which was just simply open up and didn't shut down any businesses. And you come to travel to Florida, the beaches are open, the restaurants are open, and California shut down everything. I've been to California. You can't go to a restaurant in California. And their results have been approximately the same, both in terms of the number of people who've gotten and the percentage of people who died and so forth. So again, if we'd had that information beforehand, I think it would have been very, very different. The economy sort of would have not been in as dire straits as it is. But you don't get to look at the world that way.
Plus, Mick, I think it's amazing, right, that in the US, 13% of the population already has at least one vaccine shot.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty amazing. And, I give you a lot of credit for making it happen. So as a US citizen, thank you.
Don't give me credit. It's keep in mind, our system here is a state-based system, so give the governors credit. But it is interesting that the media here excoriated the Trump administration for several months, almost a year, about how we're handling COVID. And we weren't doing as good a job as our European allies and friends, and that we are far in advance of where the Europeans are right now in terms of the percentage of people that we have had vaccinated. So it's a joint effort here. It's a bipartisan effort. I wish the Biden administration very well. I got asked a question the other day as to whether or not the Biden administration was taking it more seriously than the Trump administration. No, they're taking it just as seriously as we did, and that's what it takes. And that's why you see the results. We could do better. We could always do better. But hopefully we'll turn the corner on this thing in the next couple of months.
So let's talk a little bit more about the new Biden administration. So Biden right now has a lot on his plate. So what are Biden's greatest challenges as he settles into office?
Well, the economy is going to be one, because clearly things have hurt. There's no question. But really, the bigger issue is the division in the nation. It's not healthy here right now. It's the point where people of one political persuasion are trying to prevent folks of another political persuasion of getting jobs. That's not what we do. We have a tradition here of fighting like hell during elections, and then once a president is elected, we sort of put that aside for at least a couple of months. Goodness gracious, certainly a couple of years. But politics has invaded everything right now. I cringe, and every time I give this example, people sort of roll their eyes and wonder if I'm being hyperbolic. But if we had a similar event tomorrow to what happened on 9/11 with the terrorist attacks in New York City, I'm not sure how our nation would react. I'm not sure we would be able to react in a united way like we did. What is it now? 20 years ago, and that I think is a big challenge. And again, I think Joe Biden wants to fix it. Left to his own devices would fix it. I just think it's a very difficult time. It's going to take a very, very special person and a very special set of circumstances to unite this nation right now. I don't see it happening in the next 2 years.
Hey, Mick, let's talk a little bit about business now. I think people have a perception that the Biden administration is going to be less business friendly than, let's say, a Republican administration.
Yeah.
So as business people, what can we do to talk and persuade the new administration on priorities such as deregulation and even really free trade?
Yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle. There's no question. Again, I think left to his own devices, Biden is sort of a center left, but the party that he represents now is hardcore left, and they don't like business. They really, really don't. We had a hearing in one of our congressional committees today on the GameStop Robinhood issue, and the anti-business vitriol was real. There are folks in the Democrat Party who believe that capitalism is unfair and unjust and unequitable. The word equity really concerns me because I don't know what it means. It means different things to different people. I know what equality means, but I don't know what equity means. And that's what the Democrat Party right now is pushing. So it's, I think, going to be very difficult. I think there's going to be elements within the Democrat Party that want to very, very rapidly and aggressively re-regulate. I think, again, we talked about the successes of the Trump administration. I think the deregulation initiative was one of those things. The Democrats hated it, and they've already taken steps to start to undo it. Stuff that doesn't make a lot of, I read the boring stuff that nobody else wants to read, the stuff that pertains to the Office of Management and Budget, and some of the directives, the executive orders, the presidential memos that have gone to the OMB would stun people if they understood what it meant when it came to the re-regulation of the American economy. So listen, I'll tell you the same thing I tell every other business group, which is that you have to take an interest in politics because politics is interested in you. And if you don't engage in the process, you'll get run over by the process. It's going to be a really, really tough 4 years. If you're looking for some analogy or barometer or metric, look to the last 4 years of the Biden administration, excuse me, the Obama administration. Many of the people that President Biden has hired are the exact same. The attitudes are the same. And in fact, the party is probably a little bit further left. In fact, I know that it is further left now than it was, say, in 2012. So look at what it was like to run a business, especially a small business in the US in 2013, and realize that it's going to be harder now. That's hard for me to say. I come from a small business background, but that is just, elections have consequences, and that's one of them.
No, Mick, we have done many, fireside chats, and I think the audience could certainly agree that you have so much knowledge, so much passion for, for politics and the U.S. Dynamics. But I think that you just joined a new firm as a partner of a firm called Exodus Capital. Can you tell me more about the firm and, and exactly what is different from that firm versus other traditional money management firms?
Real briefly, and thanks for asking, is that we have a thesis. In fact, I was on TV this morning here in the United States about these Robinhood GameStop hearings, and they asked me, why are these hearings taking place? And I said, well, because Washington doesn't understand Wall Street. The flip side of that is that Wall Street does not understand Washington. These are two entirely different things. You think there's a cultural difference between the Republic of Korea and the United States, and that's true. There's probably more cultural differences between inside the Beltway in Washington and the southern and Midtown Manhattan. And we believe at Exodus Capital that there's the opportunity to take advantage of that asymmetry of understanding. It's not information. We only deal with public information. But we understand Washington in a way that most folks don't. So what we've done is set up an investment fund to try and take advantage of that, specifically in the financial services area. Because I was on The Economist magazine asked me to participate in a global conference about, 2 months ago, right after the election. I'm on this panel with this leading economists from the major investment banks all around the world, and they were all cheering the Biden administration, how it would be great for financial services. And I get on there and I said, look, I don't know what kind of drugs you people are on, but I would please like some of them, because it's going to be miserable for financial services for the next 4 years. And I laid out the case why. And over the course of the last 2 months, you started to see how Wall Street come around to like, whoa, well, maybe we didn't know that was going to happen. We didn't want that to happen. Maybe Biden's not as good as we thought that it was. We saw this 3 or 4 months ago. And we think there's an opportunity there for our investors to benefit from our understanding of the business. So Exodus Capital is dedicated to doing that, and it's had some mild success so far. Thank you for asking.
Then how are you drawing on your own unique special background and insights in your new role at Exodus Capital, especially your previous position as head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau?
Yeah, listen, folks, I think folks overseas especially, but folks in the United States don't understand this either. So it's not unique. The government doesn't change much. Okay, about 99% of the people who work for the federal government will stay from a Republican administration to a Democrat administration. It's that thin veneer of people on the top who, granted, help set policy, who change. So there's a different Office of Management and Budget Director right now than there was when I was there. But the workings of government stay the same. The process of government stays the same. The rhythm and the language of government stays the same. And the Office of Management and Budget is uniquely situated to understand that language and that rhythm and that culture. So what we're trying to tell people and take advantage of is the fact that, look, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're a Democrat, there are certain things that we can perceive in what is happening in government that give us an advantage over everybody else who doesn't get it. I'll give you one example. The CFPB a week ago put on something on their website about hiring new attorneys in a certain office, okay? No one cares about this. I care about this because I understand where those people are going to be working, and I understand what those people are going to be doing, and I understand what the mission and the mentality of the senior leaders in that organization are, and how that's going to translate into re-regulation of various subsections of the financial services industry. So that's the type of thing that it's really boring to most folks. But when you're investing, 20 or 30 or $40 million, you want to have that kind of insight, and we think that we've got it.
So Mick, how can, Korea and the business community here in, in our country help you or play in your vision for Exodus Capital?
Oh, just reach out through you, reach out through me. I'm still the easiest person in the whole world to find, which drives me nuts because my cell phone is still on the internet. But we're more than happy. You guys have been great partners and great friends for a couple of years now. So we're more than happy to work with you folks. We do appeal to not only, by the way, we're really boring. We're lined up for pensions and insurance companies and endowments and high wealth individuals who want to park their money someplace until they can spend it someplace else. We're not trying to make people rich. We're trying to preserve capital until the opportunities to get rich arise. So just reach out to you, reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to talk to folks.
As you know, Mick, AMCHAM is a non-political, nonpartisan organization. And regardless, I'm a big fan of yours. So thank you for
How have I done about being nonpartisan tonight? Have I done all right? Probably not.
No, I think you did. You were very fair, and that's exactly why we wanted to have you on this Fireside Chat. But I do have a couple of questions from the audience, which I wanted to bring up, if you don't mind. So one of the questions from the audience is, what agenda should be the top priority for bilateral cooperation between President Biden and President Moon?
To mend any fences that might have been tarnished or rended over security, over the joint agreements, the joint defense agreements, and so forth, and the relationship with North Korea. That's the first place to start. I always saw that is really the only place where the president really took President Moon to task. I mean, look, the economic ties are great. Yes, President Trump always focused on the trade in automobiles and so forth. I think that will fall naturally by the wayside. I think everybody recognizes now that the automotive industry is a global industry, and that American consumers benefit from a strong Korean automotive market, just like you would benefit from a strong domestic U.S. automotive market, especially when it comes to innovation. There's been some wonderful press here about some of the work that Hyundai is doing on electric vehicles. That benefits everybody here. So I'm not too concerned about the economic relationship. Certainly, we want to make sure you don't take it for granted. You want to tend it and take care of it. But really, it was the security agreement. I know that that created a little bit of friction, and I would encourage the Biden administration to reach out and say, look, whatever you think, we're still friends. Everything's good. We both recognize the importance of the republic in Southeast Asia, and we're going to continue to work together.
Another question has to do with China containment. It seems like U.S. is aligning pretty closely with India, Australia, and Japan. So what's your view on the future U.S.-Korea alliance, especially with the upcoming OPCON transfer?
Yeah, very positive. It just is. I mean, look, like I said, the one thing that's bipartisan right now in Washington, D.C. is antipathy towards China. And Korea plays an important role in that. I was one of the folks who encouraged the president to go to India to meet with Prime Minister Modi. We've had a tremendous development of our relationship with Australia because of the leadership of Scott Morrison, and there was no world leader closer to President Trump than Shinzo Abe. I know he's gone now, but listen, the world benefits from balance. It just does. It benefited from in a bizarre way of a Cold War balance between the Americans and the Russians, and it led to peace and prosperity in most of the world outside of Russia. Balance today is a good thing, and if we can figure out a way to work together to bring some balance to China and Asia, I think that benefits everybody, including the Chinese. So I would just encourage everybody to continue to the dialogue and recognizing that democracies are different than communist dictatorships, and that we have a lot more than we do in opposition.
Another question from the audience. Should individuals and businesses expect a significant increase in taxes under the Biden administration?
Yeah, probably. In a variety of forms, yes, is the answer to the question. I don't know what it would look like, but that goes back to, listen, there, again, elections have consequences. And when the Democrats win under the circumstances that they did, there's going to be a tax increase in some fashion. It's absolutely, and by the way, I'm famous for being wrong on predictions, so I give that as the caveat. Corporate taxes are absolutely going up. Maybe not by much, but they are. The top marginal rate is probably going to go up by maybe a little bit more than it'll go up on corporate. I'm not so sure about the estate tax. That's a sort of a thing that cuts both ways, especially when it comes to Democrat and Republican states. Illinois is still it's a farm state, and farmers care a lot about the estate tax. So yeah, taxes are going to go up. And I guess taxes will go up at the state level as well. We're going to have to listen. I got to tell you, what else do you expect? If we spend this much money, taxes should go up, right? I mean, other than that, you're just printing the money. So one way to dampen inflation is to raise taxes. It just is. That's the way economics works. So yeah, I think they're probably going to go up. And as much as I don't like it and wish that folks would look at what the Trump administration did as a model for prosperity, they're not going to do that. And the current administration is going to raise taxes. So
a couple of 2024 related questions. So besides former President Trump, who do you see as the top Republican, candidates for office? And then just a follow-up is if President Biden does not run for re-election, who do you pick on the Democrat side? Just to run.
Wow. Okay. Real quickly, because there's 35 names, so I'm not going to do it that way. Let me give you 5 on the Republican side, and let me think about the Democrats. So 2 women, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, and Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina. Republican Senator Tim Scott, also from South Carolina, be very interesting for me. I'm from South Carolina. 2 of my friends who were running for president. Somebody from Florida, whether it's Rick Scott or Marco Rubio or Governor DeSantis, and then a celebrity. Somebody from outside the world of politics, whether or not that's television star Tucker Carlson or movie star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Those are the names we hear about. And you could add a bunch of folks to that. Senators, governors, the guy walking down the street, the guy who, delivers your mail. Everybody's going to want to run on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, certainly Kamala Harris, assuming Joe Biden doesn't run, Kamala Harris, but she is not the prohibitive favorite right now. And face it, she got crushed in the primaries. I don't think she got above 1%. And all the Democrats know that as well. And as much as they're all for party unity right now, when the presidency is vacant, that sort of goes out the window. So my guess is you'll see a bunch of Democrat governors. Gavin Newsom in California would have been a likely candidate if he can survive recall in the next couple of weeks. He probably still is. Cuomo in New York, another candidate as well. There's some talented Democrat senators, not that many House members. My major disappointment is that my good friend Joe Kennedy, Democrat House member from Massachusetts, one of the Kennedy family. And yes, Republicans do have friends who are Democrats and vice versa. I was really rooting for him to win that Senate seat this year, and he lost. But I thought if he had won, he'd be a viable presidential candidate in 2024 as well. So look, American politics is fluid. It's always been fluid. It's going to remain fluid, especially going into 2024.
Mick, I wanted to really, really thank you for your time, just your knowledge, your insights, and your transparency. I know you have a difficult job ahead, but I wish you nothing but success. I really hope to see you in even a bigger capacity, because you're still a young man and you got a lot of things going for yourself. And Mina, I'm sure you have a few things to say to Mick as well.
I really enjoyed today's talk. It was a great talk, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, and Mick, you have friends in Korea they can count on. So please, whenever you're back, we want to speak with you. Okay, Mick?
But once COVID is over, I look forward to that. Thanks y'all for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mick. And thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you for your time.